Hello and welcome back. This is a new episode of the Data Science Daily series, and today is going to be a very practical session. So we have covered a few concepts in the last few videos. We have covered control flow statements, comprehensions, and we have actually covered a lot of stuff. Now, when you're learning coding, it's important to get hands-on and get familiar with certain examples. So unless you solve some questions, you will not be able to actually code really well. So the goal of today's session is basically to give you 3 questions where we will walk through each question's solution step by step, but I will give you the thinking process. How do you actually solve a question in Python, right? How do you do that kind of a programmatical thinking, right? So you need to think programmatically, right? Okay, so without further ado, let's get started and get your Jupyter notebooks ready because you will need to code here. So what you should do is you should have the question explained, right? Okay, just give me a minute. Yeah. So you should wait for the question to be explained. You should stop the video, think about it at your own side, and after that, you should try to see the solution and compare it with your own solution, right? What parts did you get right and which parts did you not get right? Okay, so let's get started, right? We have a lot to cover today. So the first question is printing leap years. And this will make use of the concepts of if, else if, and else, right? The control flow statements. The question is asking, write a program that prints years from 1300 to 2000 in gaps of 20. Right? Just print these years in gaps of 20 between 1300 and 2000, both of these years included, right? Now, there are certain conditions that are laid out. For multiples of only 4, not 100, print I'm a leap year instead, right? So you're printing years, but if there is an year which is basically a multiple of only 4 but not 100, print that it is a leap year, right? For multiples of 100 and which are not multiples of 4, right? Not multiples of 400, right? So they are like 1900, 1800, 1700. They are multiples of 100, which means they are divisible by 4, but they are not leap years because in century years, the century year should be divisible by 400 for it to be a leap year, right? Something we learned back in high school. So for multiples of 100, which is not multiple of 400, print I look like a leap year, but I am not. And then finally, for multiples of 400, print I'm a century leap year, right? Okay. So how would you go about solving this? At this point, pause the video, solve it at your own side, and then resume watching the video. So I will go through a first raw method, what you would think, right? The first thing that you need to keep in mind is you want to print years between a certain range. So you make use of the range function that we discussed. So I will use range. 1300 is the starting point. This will be included. 2000 we also want to be included, so the stop should be 1 extra, right? It should be 2000 plus 1. So if you use 2001 as the end, it will stop at 2000. It will take 2000 and stop there, right? So that's why we are making this 2001, and then in increments of 20, right? This is the step size, which is 20. So I'm using the range method within a for loop, right? So for year in range, then, right, I have to put conditions. So I cannot print the year directly, right? Because I have conditions. If those conditions are met, I need to print something else. So the first condition is for multiples of only 4, not 100, print I am a leap year. So if year is divisible by 4, remember this is the modulo operator, and year is divisible by 100, it is not divisible by 100, sorry. So if it is divisible by 4 and not divisible by 100, print I'm a leap year. Else if the year is divisible by 100 and it is not divisible by 400, print I look like a leap year, but I am not. And then finally, if the year is divisible by 400, print I'm a century leap year. And then finally, the last one is just print the year. So we have gone through the instructions one by one and added conditions for each of those, right? Multiples of 4, not multiples of 100, print I'm a leap year. Multiples of 100, not multiples of 400, it is not a leap year. Multiples of 400, it is a century leap year, right? Otherwise, just print the year. And if you run this, you will see that this is the output. So 1300 is not a leap year. It looks like that. 1320 is, 1340 is, 1360 is, and so on, right? 1400 is not, 1600 is a century leap year, right? So it's printing and it's exactly doing what we wanted to do. I've also used an F string just for reference, right? I'm printing the year and hyphen and then printing the description of it, right? Now, one thing you can keep in mind here, right? Now, I just want to show you one more thing. You don't really need the else statement in this particular question. Why? Because you're printing in multiples of 20 and it will satisfy one of these conditions actually. So what you could also have done is, so this is removing one condition. I remove this else statement, right? And I can remove this last one also and make this just an else. Because if the first two conditions are basically not satisfied, it is going to be a century leap year. And you will get the same output. Right? So you're getting the same output. You can see that it is picking that 400, whatever is divisible by 400 is a century leap year, everything else is exactly the same. Right? So you can remove one condition as well. Now, let's do this. Let's see a cleaner way to solve the same thing, right? So I have started from the bottom. I'm saying first by 4, not by 100, then by 100, not by 400, and then if it is by 400, then it is. What you can do is you can do the reverse, and that will be a cleaner solution. First, see if it is divisible by 400. It is a century leap year. Else if it is divisible by 100, it is looking, but it is not. Now, what this does, let me go to the code and let's discuss this. So the for will remain the same, but what I'm doing here is now I'm taking the first condition as year is divisible by 400, print I'm a century leap year. If it is not divisible by 400, then only it will go to the second statement, which is saying if it is divisible by 100, right, and it is not divisible by 400, print I look like a leap year, but I'm not. So the and thinking is already in place in this kind of a structure, because else if will only get called if the first one is not true, right? So that is already coming here in this statement. Else if, right? So now this third statement, which is else if year is divisible by 4, it is automatically taking into account that it is not divisible by 100, right? Because this third statement will only get called if the second and the first statements are not right, and we are concerned with the second statement here, which should not be correct, right, in order for it to be a leap year, right? So year is divisible by 4 but not divisible by 100, print I'm a leap year. Else basically print year. And this is a much cleaner solution. Again, one thing you could do here is you can remove one condition, right? But remember, why are you able to remove one condition? Because in this case, you're doing increments by 20 and the existing conditions actually satisfy all the years, right? So the set of existing conditions satisfy all the years basically. That's why we are able to remove, but you'll not be able to. So if you want a generic solution, this is the one. If you want to make it more optimized for this particular case, what you can do is you can remove this last else and just make the last condition else itself, and you will see the same output, right? Okay. So very, very important to keep in mind how you are creating this if, else if, and else statements. How are you actually writing these statements? The thinking process needs to be very, very well thought out so that you're writing a cleaner code, right? So you can see that you are just writing this. It's so easy to read and it's so intuitive. Whereas if you see this, you're adding, and conditions twice, right? So this is more, it's not that clean a solution. If you can come up with a clean optimized solution, that's the best. Okay, now let's go to the next question. Pattern printing. Now this will use loops. Print the following pattern using loops. So asterisk, and then this is increasing, right? You are getting 5 asterisks, and then you are adding a 1 plus, and then it is, you're repeating that 5 times. So how do you do this? Okay, the first thing I'm doing is I'm defining a tuple of symbols to print. So I have 2 unique symbols that I want to print, and I have 5 rows in which I want to print them, and they are basically the 5th row has 5 times that symbol. Similarly, I'm then changing to plus, and then the 5th row for plus has 5 times that symbol. Right, so I'm just defining this first. Again, stop the video, try to solve it by yourself before coming here. Just a kind reminder. Now, first method to solve is a very simple method. You know what you want to print, you can hard code certain values. Hard code means, we will shortly see what that means. So I'm saying for I in range num rows, so num rows is 5. So basically 5 times, right? Print symbol ls0, the 0th index of this list, which is just the asterisk symbol, multiplied by I plus 1. Now, I will start with 0, right? Because you have just mentioned one argument in the range function, which is num rows, which is the stop, basically. Start is by default 0. So I will become 0 first, it will become 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will stop there. The loop will complete, right? 5 will never get called. So I is 0 first. So 0 plus 1 becomes 1, right? And you're multiplying that with the symbol, which is just one instance of that symbol, right? Then you will go back to the top of the loop, right? Remember, this for loop is not yet executed. So it will go back to the top. I will now become 1. I plus 1 will become 2. And then in the next row, it will print the asterisk 2 times, basically, right? Because you are multiplying a string by 2. If you multiply a string by 2, it basically concatenates and it becomes twice, right? So if you do this, which is what I'm trying to explain, you do this, it will become like this, right? It concatenates itself. So this is what is happening. And similarly, it will go on till 5, basically. I plus 1 will become 5. I will only go till 4. So you will get this kind of a pattern, right? What we are wanting. And similar thing you will do with the plus sign also. So you will just change the symbol that you're taking and again run a for loop. So if you run this, let's run this from the top. This is what you would get. Now, this is one way to do this, right? Another way to do this, before we discuss what is hard coding, is you are defining 2 for loops here. What you can do is you can just make do with 1 for loop, and you can use if and else statements here. What you could do is you can say for I in range, right? Num rows multiplied by how many symbols there are, which is the len method we are using. So the list of symbols has a length of 2. There are 2 symbols within it, or 2 elements within it. So num rows into 2 is 10. So basically, I'm going from 0, 1, 2 till 9, right? That is the value that I will take in this particular line of code. Now, after that, if I is less than 5, that is, if I takes the value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, print what we were printing earlier, exactly same thing, right? Basically the symbol, and just increase it in a triangular manner like this. Else, basically when I becomes greater than equal to 5, then you print that plus symbol, right? So this is basically referring to the plus symbol, and you increment it. Now this is where it becomes interesting. You are slightly removing hard coding. You take the modulo of I, right, by 5. That is, if I is 5, the modulo by 5 will become 0. If I is 6, the modulo by 5 will become 1. If I is 7, the modulo by 5 will become 2. So you can see that this I modulo 5 will if this else is called, which is basically when I is greater than equal to 5, this I modulo 5 will basically become a counter starting from 0. It will become 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Exactly what we were seeing here in the previous code, where we had coded it like this, where I plus 1 I was always basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Similar thing is happening here, but the only reason why we are using this is because I is now ranging from 0 to 9, right? So you cannot actually call this code directly. You need to use this modulo operator, make this particular expression range from 1 to 5, and so that you can create the triangle. You are multiplying the symbol by 1 to 5, right? So you can, if you do this, you will see that you're getting the same output, but now it is slightly more cleaner, right? And you have removed one part of the hard coding. Now, how do you remove every part of the hard coding? Now, what am I referring to hard coding here? I'm referring to hard coding as what you have coded is that you have two symbols and you are giving that symbol list 0 is like this, symbol list 1 is like this, right? So you're basically saying that for the first symbol do this, for the second symbol do this. So you already know that there are two symbols in that list. What if you had 100 symbols? Would you write this if else, if else, if else 100 times? Would that be appropriate? Would that even be possible? Probably not, right? So how do you make this without hard coding? Now, let's identify where exactly is hard coding occurring. Now, the hard coding is occurring where you're having this if and else statements. How do we get rid of this? Now, why are these needed? Right? First, let's see this we are trying to remove hard coding. We're trying to remove if and else statements, which basically means we want one single expression which needs to be executed within this entire for loop, which will give us the answer. So two lines of code, one for and one expression, which will give us the same output. How do we do that? And how do we remove the if else statements? So basically, if you see the first statement, we are trying to equate this to the second statement in some way. We are trying to change the value so that it's not hard coded. Now, if you change this first one, I, to I modulo 5, the values will exactly remain the same, right? Because I is ranging from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So even if you do the modulo, if you get the remainder by dividing by 5, it will still remain 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the one thing you can make this to keep it similar. So I modulo 5 plus 1 will become this right-hand side part of the expression. Now, the left-hand side is also something which you are hard coding, 0 and 1. Is there a way that we can probably remove the hard coding here? Think about this. So I basically, when it is ranging from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we want to keep the value 0 here. And when I becomes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we want to keep the value 1. What can you do with the counter? You can take a floor division by 5, right? So if you do I floor division 5, basically it's the quotient. So if I is 0, the quotient if you divide by 5 is 0. 1, the floor division is basically 0. 2, 3, 4, the floor division by 5 is 0, right? So if you do a floor division here, it will work, right? And when it becomes 5, when I becomes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the floor division by 5 will automatically become 1, right? So you don't need to write 1. You can simply write I floor division 5, which will make these two expressions exactly the same. And this is exactly what we have here. So this is the first line of code, which is same for loop. But now what I'm saying is I'm taking the the list of symbols, and I'm adding a floor division by 5, which is basically mimicking the 0 and 1. And this right-hand side is simply I modulo 5 plus 1. Right? If you do this, it will give you the exactly same output. But it is so much cleaner. It is so much more scalable, right? If you had multiple 100 symbols, it will work, right? Do you want to see that? Okay, let's see that. So this is your symbol list, right? Let me append. Okay, we cannot append. We can create. So that's the reason why I have used tuples, because you cannot change them, and that is appropriate for this use case. But now that we want to add more, let's put minus, and let's put division also, right? And let me use the same quotation marks. So this is what it will look like. Now I'll just make this symbol list 2, right? Because I cannot change the inherent symbol list. It's actually not a list, it's a tuple, right? Okay. This is what my symbol tuple 2 is. So I will change this code here. Or let me second method to solve scaled, and I'll just change symbol list 2. So this is the issue. Don't worry, the code will still work fine, right? So symbol list 2 should be called here, it should be called here, and you can see that it has just scaled up, right, with this particular set of code, 2 lines of code. Now, this is what I want to emphasize. Hard coding, you can remove. Third method is you can also use a while loop. What you need to do in a while loop is you need to set a counter, because while only checks for a condition. It doesn't actually have a counter, unlike a for loop, which has a counter. So I am setting a 0, and I'm saying basically the same thing I'm translating into a while loop from the previous code, exactly the optimized code that we just saw. While I is less than this particular value, which is 10, right? Print that same thing, and I increase the counter of I by 1, right? So it will give you the same output. And if you do this for the scaled version where you are using the second tuple of symbols, you will again get the same output, right? This is the power of code, and I hope this is very clear for you. If not, make sure you are stopping it, rewatching it, and not stopping until you actually get it. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. The last question, it's on word count. We want to create a dictionary comprehension where basically the comprehension is used to create a dictionary where the keys are words and the values are the occurrences, the number of occurrences of those words, right? So the string is basically a part from Harry Potter where Harry actually comes inside Hogwarts, right? I'm just taking this small snippet of about 100 words. How would you do this without using dictionary comprehension, right? So I have a text variable, right? I have created this. Next thing is I want to get the words. Now to get the words from this text, remember we discussed a split method when we were discussing the string data type in detail, right? So words is equal to text.split. And I am indexing this particular variable words, all the words. I'm just showing you the first 4 words. This is Harry pushed the heavy, right? The first 4 words, I'm just showing you that with this. Now, if this part is not clear to you, make sure you are going to the data types, the string video, where I'm describing the methods for strings in a lot of detail, right? And you're understanding this. All right. So I'm getting the words now, and I'm just displaying the first 4 words. Now, without comprehension, what you need to do is you need to initialize an empty dictionary, and you need to use a for loop that for each word, basically count the number of times that word is occurring in that list. So the list is words. How many times is each word occurring, right? So words.count word, right? You're counting the number of times that word is occurring, and that is your word count. And you're updating the dictionary with the word and its count, right? So each word, even if it is appearing twice, right? What will happen is first time it occurs, we will look through the entire dictionary, entire list, right? Entire list of the words and find out the number of occurrences, update the dictionary. The second time it occurs, right? Again, in this for loop, that second occurrence of that word. For example, Harry is coming as the first word. First, it's counting the number of times that Harry is occurring. So Harry is occurring here and Harry is occurring in the last sentence, right? So automatically it's updating the dictionary with Harry value as 2. But when it goes to this entire particular text, it will again come to Harry towards the end. Word will become Harry. So again, it will re-update the dictionary. Although that's not really required, that's suboptimal, but it's still doing that and it is working basically. So this is what you will get as an output, right? Now, the thing is, how do you do this with a dictionary comprehension? Very simple single line of code. Dict_comp is equal to word colon words.count word, which is giving you the count of that word in the entire text for word in words, right? So you will see that you're getting the exact same output, and there is no particular key which is repeating twice, right? Because in dictionaries, keys cannot repeat. So even though Harry is getting called twice in this for loop, basically the dictionary is only counting it as 1, right? So Harry is 2 is only occurring once, although the word Harry itself is occurring twice. So you might be confused and you might think that, okay, for word in words, Harry will come twice. And so my dictionary will basically get two different instances of Harry colon 2, Harry colon 2, but that will not happen because it only keeps one key, one unique key. All right. So we have covered the three questions that I had planned for today. The first one was if-else control statements. The second one was for and while loops. And we discussed about hard coding and how do you remove hard coding? How do you make this more efficient? And the third one is we discussed comprehensions using a simple example of dictionary comprehension. I would suggest you to keep watching that particular video. If it's whatever concept is not clear, go back, watch the concept and come back here and again try to solve this. Tomorrow in the next session, what we will do is we will dive into comprehensions and we will look at conditional statements within comprehensions and nested comprehensions, mainly through some examples where again, I would request you to stop the videos, try to solve it by yourself and then see the solution. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.